Although it's so funny, and one of the, it's actually a phrase from the narrative world, but there's this like concept of narrative smoothing, which we do to kind of round out some of the rougher edges of our stories, particularly if we want to come across a certain ways. And the same thing happens in mirrors. If you look at yourself in the mirror, you see one version of yourself. If you see a photograph of yourself at the same moment, it looks completely different because our brain smooths over in the mirror how we would like to seem, how we've seen all our life. We seem younger in the mirror, usually than in a photograph where it just captures it right there. Yeah. So, anyways, so welcome, and I recognize that some of you are, I think, here for the first time. So I would like to do two things. If you've been to, this is our third in our series. If you've been to one so far, I would love to hear kind of where you are and what this has meant for you or spoken to you at so far in terms of what you're doing today. And if you're brand new to us, what brought you here? What are you thinking, hoping this might be? And then we'll see where those two uh, currents intersect. So maybe one of the folks who's been here can start it off by what are you bringing from the first session or two that you attended? What's on your mind?
I'll share, David.
Yes, Colleen.
So I've had the privilege of being able to join a number of these, and I really found in the first session that you did earlier this month when you were talking about the pattern interruption was an incredibly eye-opening one for myself, in addition to being able to use that with other individuals that I interact with.
And what did that offer you?
Greater insights with respect to my need to control. And then also, having been to the BCE today too,
Yeah.
about just trusting in things and allowing life to unfold as it should.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually, I think it's interesting. Actually, that's a far more active process than we imagine. It's not like riding your bikes with no hands, right? I'm just free of everything. I can just go with the flow because sometimes you don't want to go where the river's taking you because your boat's going to crash right into the shore and tip you over. So it's just being more aware, not necessarily, yeah, it's interesting thing about being surrender but awake at the same time. Yeah. And how about for some of our new folks? I see a couple of things from Anne. It's good to see you again. It's been a while. But for anybody else in terms of what you're curious about in terms of why you came today? Hmm. Yeah, Susan.
Um, so I was here last month,
Mm-hmm.
and really enjoyed it, and just had to look over my notes from last time because I didn't remember any of it, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. Yes.
That goes with age, I think.
No, it actually goes with how our brains are wired from the very beginning.
Yes.
And it's why we don't focus a lot in these sessions on teaching anything because you will have forgotten it by tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
the experiences you have and things that plant seeds in you and connections between neurons that get a little bit excited about something, given the right love and care, often begin over time to form an insight or a shift in ourself. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the midst of packing up my house, and I'm all the different selves from all the different ages I've been are encountering objects from different parts of my life. And then they're having arguments with each other about should I take this or not? Because the part of me that was alive when that event, that object was connected, yes, we need this. And the new part of me says, no, we don't need, that was from before. We don't need that anymore. And so it's a fascinating conversation about kind of how to hold space for these many parts of ourself. And
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else who'd like to share? Otherwise, oh, yes.
Parker.
Hey, Parker.
I'm sorry, I still have my name up wrong.
That's
from
okay.
earlier. Sorry about that. So I wanted to just say that I find myself in a place of curiosity. And actually right now I am just coming off a client call. So it's sort of like switching into a different mode of, you know, being actively engaged from a different place than when I'm actually coaching. And I've been on 2 of these, but then I've listened to some of the tapes that you all have posted. So that's been really good. And one of the things that for me is just so interesting and novel is in one of the recordings, it said, can you hold a space for difficult conversations? And it seems like lately, I do a lot of international work for international organizations, and I'm having a number of clients who are really in these sort of difficult conversations around both who they are and who they're dealing with, and that they're not getting along with certain people. And so that was just sort of interesting for me because it's what the non-coach person or the coachee client is really dealing with. And I think I see it also within, you know, our country. It's, yeah, I'm from the US and there's so much going on around difficult conversations and people not really holding that space of being kind and good and charitable. So
yeah, thanks for sharing.
Just one more, if I might, David.
Yeah, Martin. Yeah.
So I did the IOC version of this and then did this. And part of the reason for that is because I'm a slow learner, but it's actually about marinating. It's actually about allowing the ideas to marinate properly. The other thing which is interesting about those 2 approaches is that they were slightly different. One was focused on design your future in coaching.
Yeah.
This is much more akin to the narrative approach that we've experienced before. So
yeah.
I have benefited from that contrast.
Yeah. So have I, because I had to show up to each one differently. Yeah, which was interesting in itself. Thanks. All right, let me just go ahead and share my screen, and then I want to, particularly for those of you who are new, we'll get us started on what content for today. And there we go. Okay, this always disappears for some reason. All right, so we're gonna revisit a couple of things, but and kind of go deeper if you've been here before, but introduce it to you for the first time. But just for those of you brand new to all this, I've written about developing coaches for a long time, and I'm just fascinated, have been all my life, with how do people actually change and what actually enables people to grow. And one of my challenges across all this time, which I see getting worse, not better, is sort of the rampant use of competency models as a way of assessing and developing people like coaches. And from all the research I did and all the things I've written now, including the report that's on the Five Maturities report that's on our website, it just it didn't make any sense to me. Competency models are great for beginners because it gives you a lay of the land, the basic elements, the basic sort of thinking, but it's not so great in terms of actually helping you move towards mastery. And what I see so often is people, for whomever reason, they're part of some kind of accreditation or certification process. They, particularly in certain associations, they end up coaching to a checklist to pass the test, and then they go back and coach like they normally coach. So they're not actually getting assessed on how they actually coached. They're getting assessed on how they pretend coaching in order to fit into the model. And or they're also not learning very much for themselves because they're not getting actual feedback on their actual coaching. And so one part of why I wrote the Five Maturities report was to begin, part of it, that first half was laying out the groundwork for the research and the evidence about why I believe we need to move to a different paradigm for developing coaches. And then the second half was more exploratory, beginning to offer some ideas and frames about what that might actually look like. And for me, as we'll see in just a little bit later in the call today, I feel like this is an opportunity for particular things like coaching to really step up to a different level. And that will require for me much more focus on maturity and less about techniques and tools and all those such things. So I want to just give you a chance to talk to each other here in a minute, but just as, again, for those of you who are new, there's obviously a lot here, but just in terms of the words in black. So this started out with what do we need besides competency to attain mastery? So there's 5 C's that kind of go into developing mastery, of which competency is one of them and only one of them, in some ways not even the most interesting one. And for each of these masteries, you need particularly a certain kind of maturity. And so and then we matched that to the I-beam model that I've teach that basically looks at what are the factors which contribute to performance. So if I just look at the first, let's just say the aspiration. So if I look at you have an aspiration to get better as a coach, and you might be drawn to take a lot of skill-based or technique-based courses. You might read lots of books to gather more information to fulfill that aspiration. But in reality, what the aspiration really is calling for, in a way, it might be thought of as spiritual maturity. And it's because what I've observed over the years that that part of what makes a better coach, for example, is not necessarily that they have better training or better knowledge or better skills, but they actually see more of what's actually happening, and they see it more clearly and they see it more fully. And part of this is backed up by research, which would lend us to believe that even people at the highest levels of certifications may or may not be better than many other practitioners. And on top of that, that there's actually many people that are not professionals at all, but are very wise and mature people who actually instinctively do a lot of what we do, sometimes better than many coaches. And why? Because they actually have the maturity to be able to see what's actually happening and as a way in themselves, in the space, in the other person. So the whole sort of purpose of the 5 maturities is to help us begin to figure out how do I make better distinctions about how I would like to grow to improve myself and or my practice, and which of these sort of 5 domains would speak to me in terms of where I might want to pay most attention. So in a minute, I'm going to give you an activity, but I just want to stop here to make sure that you have enough of an understanding for me then to explain the instructions for what I would like of you. So for now, I'm just going to stop and see if there's any questions you have or thoughts or anything that would be meaningful to you.
Can you expand a bit on spiritual? Just trying to get my head around that word.
Yes, I know it creates some cognitive congestion for some people because it's sort of a loaded word for some people. So, so I think that there's there's at least two parts of this I would focus on. So one is, for me, it may or may not include religion for people. I think of it in some ways as a small s spiritual. It doesn't have to be a literal word, although it can be. But it's more two things that stand out for me about this maturity. So one is I've done enough work on myself to start to understand my major biases and blind spots. I've done enough work on myself to recognize that not everybody sees the world the way I do, and that there's many perspectives. And then the second piece that this one brings is a clarity allows us to think more expansively about time and space because we can see ourselves as part of a larger story, as part of a larger cosmos. And so, for example, you might be coaching somebody who's got a lot of tricky dilemmas in their role as a leader. And let's say if it was me, and so I, as a white man, might, if I'm not aware of myself enough, might be coaching them around directions or issues that would presume a privilege they may not experience for themselves. I might help them to rise out of the mud of their particular annoyance or frustration to kind of see the bigger pattern of what's in play. So for me, doing spiritual work in whatever form that looks like to you allows us to have more clarity about how we see reality. Okay, is that helpful?
Yeah, very. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The question.
Yeah, Parker.
I was just curious as to why all of the things in light blue are written sort of with what's not working or what you didn't see, what you couldn't access.
Because I'm going to use those for the practice we're about to do.
Because I was just wondering, would it work also if you said, what did you see and feel, or what did you actually do?
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think we don't think long enough about that.
That's also a great question. So when you're in your practice and you want to be a rebel and do the exact opposite of what I'm asking you, I would suggest that you go for that and do that. Exactly.
Well, that would be me.
Because then I will feel successful that you've not just complied. Anything else for right now? Okay.
Always think one of the issues here is that you don't know what you don't know. And particularly with maturity, if you haven't got the maturity, you actually can't necessarily see where you are.
Right.
I'm still grappling with that.
Yeah, so you mostly see it by consequences.
Yeah.
Like you notice what happens and you think, what did I not see about the situation that might have contributed to that consequence? And a lot of these, and that's a part why Parker, to your question, part of why these are sort of framed as the not is because that helps us to find what we don't see, or we don't. What did I not notice about myself? What role did I get trapped in, and what role did I refuse to play? But it probably would have been really helpful to me. So oftentimes we can see what's true for us in relief by what's absent and or by the consequences of what we're doing, which then gives us some clue about what we were telling ourselves at the time. Okay, so here's what I'd like you to do. I'm going to put you into breakout rooms, and I'm going to invite you to think about an encounter in your recent life that maybe was, either didn't go the way you wanted, or you're just curious about why it went the way it did, or you already started to reflect on, I think I could have done that differently. And just again, not because I want you to, there's no quiz about this. So just based on this initial understanding, which of these 5 sort of sections might share some light or shed some light for you on what you might want to learn from this opportunity. And so, and again, going back to Martin's point, if you struggle to answer these questions yourself, and this encounter involves somebody else, you might ask them, what would they say if we asked them about what they would wish for you? Again, as another way to get outside of ourselves, to perhaps see more than we might otherwise, because we're quite good at deceiving ourselves. All right, are there any questions or thoughts before we go into breakout rooms? If you're somebody that likes directions, you might want to just take a screenshot of this, and then you'll have this for yourself in your breakout room. All right. So yeah, let's go. So we'll give you 30 minutes. Okay, enjoy. There we go.
Oh, that was good.
You having fun, Anna?
Yes, had a
Excellent.
wonderful, wonderful dialogue with Anne.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. And
So,
as always, David, you managed to interrupt us in mid-sentence, so perfect timing.
I planned that. I was waiting just for that perfect moment, Anne. Yeah,
And he was listening to make sure he did that.
exactly. Very carefully. Yeah, it just really works out that way. But aside from that, rude interruption by me, apparently. I'm curious what came out of your conversations. Like, what feels important to you about that? Yeah, Mila.
One thing that came out of our conversation that I found interesting was that the inquiries led very naturally into the next one. It was very obvious where the conversation was go to follow the train from one to the next, which was, I was not expecting. I was sort of more anticipating that it would kind of bounce around and have an idea here, an idea there, but it really led quite cleanly from one concept to the next.
Yeah. And, those of you who've studied with me before know my bias towards focusing on fewer things. And when you're walking away from a conversation, maybe that didn't go well, or a client session that feels a bit puzzling, there's only so much we can really absorb and reflect on and do much with, given everything else on our plates. And so I find just asking ourselves even one simple question several times in a row. Yeah, just to kind of stay focused and go a bit deeper with maybe one thing, as opposed to trying to run like a hamster around touching all 5. Yeah. Laurel.
Yeah, we noticed that more than one of these maturities was in operation, shall we say, in our examples. And we talked about a concept from Ken Wilber about levels in maturity. He has lines of development, and people are, are at different levels and different lines. They might be very high in spiritual and very low in social.
Yes.
Spiritual teachers who are having affairs.
Yes.
And so I liked that insight that everything is operating. It may be that, in one area is needing, in retrospect, we wish we had more clarity or more skills in the environment area, or, something like that. So
yeah. I can think of people that we know, and maybe even some of you that experience yourself as being fairly sensitive and perceptive, maybe a high degree of spiritual maturity, but may not always be able to access all the emotions that go with it in themselves, or to manage feelings that they have, which might be stronger than than they want, because they just absorb a lot of information from their environment. So it just gets us to think how they kind of relate to each other, how they sometimes reinforce each other, sometimes they fight each other. But just kind of giving, for me, I just find it's a shorthand. Like if I'm trying to process something that just happened, I can pretty easily tell now, after this much time, kind of which of these areas is really one to pay attention to for me to make sense of what just happened. Yeah. Is it Philippa?
Philippa.
Philippa. Okay.
Hi, David.
Hello.
I just wanted to share, in working with Mila, one of the things I really appreciated was, or firstly, I'll go back a step. When I first saw the questions, I thought, oh, wow, in relation to this scenario, I just don't know where to start with any of those questions. She was very patient with me, and I got something out of every question. And one of the flexibilities that she afforded me that was actually really useful was to think about the question, not just in terms of what did I not do, but what did the group maybe not do. It was a board meeting example. And as somebody who tends to shoulder more of the responsibility sometimes than is healthy for my own well-being, it was a useful way to look at some of those questions, both personally but also more broadly. It helped me see more of the situation, and by doing that, then about my role in relation to it. So I guess I'm saying that, yeah, the questions being a great basis for some small adaptations in the same kind of direction or quadrant, if you like. Yeah, the same focus, but yeah, I said what I was going to say already.
Okay.
It's really, yeah, really great. Thank you.
You're welcome. And anybody else want to share from their experience or from their group? Yeah, Lenny.
Yeah, thank you, David. It was a great group, and it was just great. Shout out to Susan and Sasha. What I notice about this experience of doing this in a small group, how it amplifies the space that's holding people to share in a way that doesn't happen if I'm trying to explore this by myself, let's say, or when I'm holding that space for a client or somebody else. It's a whole different experience, and it's very powerful, and I appreciate it so much. And one of the things that kind of, it was like a theme going through it, was recognizing how many of the three of us, at least, often are bound by our self-appointed role, whether it's a coach, a fixer, a mediator, a peacekeeper, a teacher, a parent, and how it kind of is like a net that runs through everything. And so maturing feels like it's a process of letting go. So many levels and in so many domains, letting go of how we see things, how we do, all those things in the cycle here, and how we look at things. One of the pieces relates directly to us all, this group, etc., being in this process of maturing, is there's so much we discover we don't know. as we grow. It's bigger than what we do often, what we know. And just being able to hold ourselves in that space of not knowing and ask a question like this one came up last week, and again, what is it for me to do? What is it for them, the other, whatever, to do? And it's a different way of looking at what we're in control of or not control of, as if those are the only choices. It's a whole different thing, and we don't already know how to do that. It's an immersion in these kind of sessions and these kind of contexts that gives us the opportunity to discover what we can or can't do next,
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
it does. It does. It's one of the, it sort of runs counter to most of our professional lives where we're being paid for what we know. We want to sound articulate and persuasive and all those kind of things, but in reality, what we're doing is holding space for mystery. And yeah, um, yeah. I'd like to give you one more encounter unless somebody else has anything they'd like to say. Okay. So I'm gonna just put up the slide here just so I can show it to you. Um, oh, if I can get my cursor to cooperate, there we go. Yeah, so I'll just use this as a brief interlude. So I'll let you read this for those of you who are new. Those would have seen this, but so for me, the broader vision for all of this work is I feel like we're at this huge turning point in our understanding of professions like coaching. And I have some thoughts about this. I've written and thought in this space for a long time, but mostly I'm interested now in hosting conversations in spaces where we are in mystery. I'm not saying here's the roadmap to get to Y when we're at X. It's just to say, through the fog, I sense there's some conversations wanting to be happening in these directions and convening things like this to begin to explore what that might actually look like. And so what I'm going to invite you to do is I'm going to, oops, what happened to the, there it is. I skipped over it. So what I'm asking you to do is someone mentioned this when we checked in, but one of the pieces that we've got a new program, 6-week program starting in October, which sort of goes into more detail on each of the 5 maturities and gives you some tools about what to do with them. And then next year we'll have launch basically a year-long retreat, go much deeper into all this. But for now, I want to pick up on this one frame, and I'm going to put you back into your original groups, and I'm going to ask you to pick one. Obviously, you can have this available to yourself. You can do this for yourself, but as you think about what you shared in your group, is there one of these 5 questions? It might relate to the maturity you were dealing with, or it might not, but is there one of these 5 questions that sort of adds some value or adds some depth to your understanding of what emerged for you from that first conversation that might give you some clues as to what you might want to do with that insight in terms of supporting more of your own maturity? All right, so are the instructions clear? And if not, just let me know. They're always clear in my head. I'm never sure if it sounds that way when you're listening. Yeah. Okay. Give you 15 minutes. Okay. You ready to go? Seeing no hands, only smiles. That's great. Enjoy. There you go.
Okay, David, 100% interrupted again. Great job.
I appreciate your acknowledgement of my psychic powers, Anne. Maybe it's just an invitation for you to share your brilliant comments earlier in your conversation. See, then you wouldn't have to worry so much.
But we haven't run out of brilliant comments. They
I
just
know.
coming.
Or I could just not show up on the call and see if the room's open. You guys can chat all day. Yeah. Anyways, we have we have about 5 or 6 minutes left, and I'm just curious what feels meaningful to say at this point for you.
I have something.
Yes, Anna.
I have long liked the Zen saying that you're where you should be doing what you should be doing, or else you'd be somewhere else doing something else. That's not the exact quote, but the conversation today was the conversation. It was the right conversation at the right time with the right person.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anne.
Yeah, and what I would add is also, you know, many of us are moving a mile a minute, and the pace of the conversation was spacious. So I always appreciate that you offer that invitation, David, for a more spacious conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. Laurel, were you going to say something?
Well, it's kind of it's something that's funny.
Okay.
I discovered after I stopped driving, I gave people directions, but they weren't always, but sometimes I would say turn right and they would turn right, but it was really left.
The other right.
So I'm not always right, but I'm convincing. It's something I learned about myself, and I'm still learning that I'm not always aware of how I'm coming across to other people.
Yeah.
That I think I'm just saying things, and to them, there's some pressure, some pushing.
Yeah. I was having this conversation yesterday with a couple of people I'm going to collaborate with, and we were talking about our curiosity about who we would be if we didn't have to perform. Yeah. Because there's years, all those little subtle micro adjustments we've made to fit in or be successful or move towards what we wanted, which obviously gives us good things as well, but or things that we desire. But there's also you just sort of wondering this sort of shaving off of parts of ourselves that don't quite fit or aren't quite as accepted. And yeah, so we were having this conversation yesterday about where do we have enough places in our life where we just get to be ourselves? Yeah. And be flagrantly wrong in our directions, but have a fabulous time doing it and being very
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Joe.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. It's been a journey getting here, but anyway, I'm here now. I've really appreciated the questions that you've given us today, David, because it's in our group. We had some wonderful in-depth conversations about the maturity levels that we're at and what we've learned through our life of practices, and knowing that we still have a journey to go, you know, and that awareness is just so important. And it's so important for us to, in the discovery of working with people, to keep discovering what's going on with ourselves so that we can be more available to the clients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what comes in, that inspires in me, Joe, is this sort of way in which we often judge people as being immature, as if maturity was a destination you could get to. And we're always mature.
Yeah.
But it's a never-ending unfolding of there's actually even more maturity. And And I think oftentimes when, we're labeled as immature in some fashion, it may be accurate at some level, but it sort of evokes senses of shame in people or things that are not very productive at all. And it's why I've not been tempted in any of this work, and I doubt I ever will be, to create a stages of maturities for these things, because I thought it just puts people back in boxes. And if we're trying to build bridges, mend fences, kind of figure out how to be on the planet together, a lot of it takes a different kind of maturity that um, and I can look at people I know in my life that I would say as a professional are developmentally not that mature in some ways, but it's also who they are, and they're on their own journey and their own discoveries or not. And I'm not, I just not, no, I'm not, it's not, I think it's an interesting academic conversation, but not very useful in real life.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's the discovery that I love in terms of finding out where I'm at and what I need to let go of and know that it's possible.
Yeah. I mean, I'm getting ready to move overseas, as many of you know, and these last couple of days, I feel like about 12 different selves having arguments within myself about what I should bring and what I should leave behind. And it's just, and I'm sort of amused. I imagine this whirlwind of memories and places and people just like in my system, and it makes for difficult sleep, but it's also quite entertaining to kind of watch and trust that this is what's happening, right? I can pretend it's not happening, but that doesn't really help. And it's a, kind of a rare moment to apparently sort some things out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thanks. I guess
Thank you.
I'm not sure I volunteered for this, but it's what's present. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's good.
Anybody else? All right.
David, do you know the dates in October?
Yeah, you should get some emails starting in a couple of days, but I can tell you it runs for 6 concurrent weeks, and it starts on the 16th of October and runs for 6 weeks. And basically, we'll have one orientation session on the 5 maturities. Then we'll take a deep dive on each of the maturities for an entire session. You'll have chances for small groups. You'll have chances for practices. And it's basically a taste of what's coming next year, which is moving all the content in true ID fashion into the background, but still showing you the path to narrative coaching and integrative development if you want that. Either as a refresher or for the first time, but most of it's going to be about our own maturation and finding new ways of practicing in the world. So it'll basically be a year-long retreat for this piece of it. The 5 maturities piece will be a year-long retreat punctuated with some content and assignments. So.
And do we know where we sign up? Will we get a link or?
You will. You'll get a link in an
registration?
email. Yeah, Steve will send you a series of emails with a link to join. Yeah, and it's a great way to kind of get a feel for this work. And so if you have any friends who you think would appreciate this, feel free to invite them. And for those of you, I know some of you have studied with me for a while, so this is the logical next thing, which is strip away all of our professional identities and get back to ourselves as human beings. And our own maturation. And I think the forms of our practice are about to change pretty significantly and somewhat, but at the core, it's going to be who we are as human beings.